So check our website. So if you and your student are working on college applications at home and have questions, go on our website and check out the Zoom drop-in help that's available. All right, so we're here tonight to go over financial aid information, and this is not. Okay, so we're gonna have a presentation here by a financial aid outreach specialist, and then we'll go over some other info, including looking for scholarships and resources that are available. Okay, so we're gonna just do one more announcement about interpretation in case anyone has shown up since we started. So we do have interpretation available in Cantonese and Spanish.
係我講廣東話嘅，如果有需要幫助嘅咧，淨係過嚟呢邊，我幫你做翻譯嘅。
Buenas noches, tenemos servicios de interpretación al español en simultáneo. Si usted desea escuchar esta presentación en español, por favor levante la mano para saber de entregarle los audífonos.
So there were several questions submitted on the registration forms. We do have those answered either throughout the presentation or at the end on our Q&A slides. And then additional questions can be submitted tonight. So if you have questions, we'll take questions at the end. You can write them down. We do have little pieces of paper in the back. Just raise your hand if you want one, and one of our staff will bring it over, and then we can ask the question anonymously, or you can just raise your hand later. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started with our presentation.
Hello everyone, my name is Lizette Rocha. I'm the Financial Aid Outreach Specialist. I am a representative from Las Positas College, so I'll be sharing a little bit about financial aid at Las Positas and financial aid in general. So how to pay for college, financial aid. How many in here are parents and students that are seniors? Okay, so most of them. Any juniors, sophomores? Okay, a few, okay. Okay, so what is financial aid, right? So financial aid is just money that helps students with the cost of attending college. So it has everything to do with going to college. So it covers tuition and fees, books and supplies, food, rent, really everything having to do with the cost of attending college. So any financial aid you receive is for any of these things. So transportation, room and board, food, laptops, tuition and fees. And financial aid comes from different sources. So financial aid comes from the federal, state, government, as well as private institutions, and like, for example, in academic institutions. So if you are planning to apply for financial aid, I know the application for the 24-25 school year is not available until December. We're hoping that, they release some things. I'll be talking about the main differences that will happen. But basically, there are different sources of financial aid. If you don't get financial aid through applying through the FAFSA or California Dream Act application, you can always look for outside scholarships that come from different organizations. So cost of attending college. Cost of attendance, I'm sure you'll see this once your students are applying to colleges, you'll receive a financial aid package. So each school has a different cost of attendance. Community colleges have a lower cost of attendance than private institutions, just simply because of that tuition factor. So cost of attendance is estimated by tuition and fees, room and board, books and supplies, and transportation and other things like that. So the main thing that we want families to know with seeing cost of attendance is when you receive that financial aid package, you're going to see cost of attendance. You're going to see maybe for a UC tuition and fees is a direct cost, it is set in stone, but everything else is dependent on your spending habits or your students' spending habits. So that's one thing to take with a grain of salt when you are seeing these costs of attendance. So the value of community college. I'm here from Las Positas, so of course I have to talk about community college. Here you can see the yearly tuition for this past year. So at Las Positas, it's $46 per unit. If a student is a full-time student, they're typically taking around 12 units. So it comes a little bit less than $600 per semester. So here you can see a comparison of a yearly tuition. Las Positas, a CSU, a UC, and a private institution. That's just accounting for tuition. It does not account for room and board. Typically, if they're going to a CSU or UC or private, they're going to be living away from home. So that amount is certainly going to increase. So yeah, at Las Positas, it's $46 per unit. And one thing I do want to mention is that at Las Positas, now it's tuition free. So if you're first-time college student, so if it's their first time, and most of them are because they're still in high school, and they're taking 12 units, and are a California resident, they get free tuition. So those $46 per unit, or around $1,000 for the entire year, you won't have to pay for it. Which is another thing to consider, especially if finances are playing a huge role in deciding where your student is going to college. So basically, understanding financial aid. I know when you fill out the application, whenever it's open in December, there's going to be several questions, some of them having related to do with your income and assets, how many students are in college, how many dependents you have. So basically they ask all of this information of both students and parents, because when calculating financial aid, they do consider students and parents as primary sources. So if a student, I know oftentimes parents say, well, they're 18, they're adults, they should be independent students. Yes, they are adults, but the only way in financial aid terms that they are independent students is when they're 24, if they're married, if they have children of their own, if their parents are deceased, or if they're in the military. Other than that, they would have to provide parent information. So those are the main things. So scholarships. Scholarships are awards based on talents, merit, and extracurricular activities. So they are a great way to get extra funds. So for example, if through financial aid grants you aren't able to get any scholarships, this is a great way because they're not always need-based. Oftentimes they are merit-based, so if your students are in extracurricular activities, it's a great way to get those extra funds. And one of the great ways is visiting your Career Center website. So I was on the website earlier today, and I know they have great resources. They have different search engines that you could use, so I would definitely take a look at your Career Center website. So types of financial aid. We refer to gift aid as that free money. So gift aid in terms of financial aid is those scholarships and grants that don't have to be paid back. Whenever you see scholarships and grants, think of it as gift aid or free money. There's also work study. So work study is available for students that might have extra need. And it's a great way for students to work on campus. For example, at the financial aid office, we have several students working our front office, and it's a great way to work in between classes. If they have like 2-hour gaps, 3-hour gaps in between classes, they're able to get involved in school as well. So that's something that students ought to do. And then there are loans. So loans, of course, are the only thing that you do have to pay back. Scholarships, grants, fee waivers, you don't have to pay back, but loans you do. And it's one thing that we really like to stress is to apply to as many scholarships as possible before program. That fee waiver is need-based, so it is important. There is that need component, and the fee waiver is regardless of how many units you are taking. So if a student is taking half-time, they could still be entitled to this fee waiver. There's also the Cal Grant and the Chafee Grant. So the Cal Grant, it's important to note now that you apply before April 2nd. So that's the priority deadline. And when you are applying on the FAFSA and California Dream Act application, and you are considering a California school, make sure to list that as number 1. Basically, if you list it as number 1 and you apply before April 2nd, you are considered for that priority deadline. What the Cal Grant is essentially it pays for your tuition. So if you do get like Cal Grant A, it could pay for the $14,000 at a UC. And you could get it for up to 4 years. So it's important that you do apply before April 2nd because that is a hard deadline. And then there's federal financial aid, so that's across the United States. That's the Pell Grant, student loans, and federal work study. So the state financial aid is only if you're attending a California school. I forgot to mention for the Chafee Grant, that's if your student was a foster youth, they could get an additional $5,000. And then federal aid is, even if they're going out of state, they could get the Pell Grant. And then institutional aid at Las Positas is the LPC scholarships, as well as the Promise Scholarship. So moving on to that fee waiver I mentioned earlier, the main important thing is that there are no minimum amount of units needed, so a student could be taking part-time and still be eligible for this fee waiver. It waives the $46 per unit, and you don't have to do a separate application. You just complete the FAFSA or California Dream Act application, and you're automatically screened for this and all the other aid. So the Cal Grant, this is the big one. There's 3 different types. So definitely, take those pictures. Cal Grant A is for high school seniors that have a GPA of at least 3.0. And this is for low to middle income students. There is Cal Grant B for high school seniors with at least a 2.0. And this is for low income students. There is a tax or an income bracket online that you can take a look at. So if you know your income, you can see if you'd be eligible for this. And the Cal Grant C is for vocational, technical, and occupational programs. And there's no GPA requirement. So basically the Cal Grant, most of them pay for your tuition. So a little bit about me, I went to Granada High School in Livermore. I went straight to UC Davis. I got Cal Grant A, and it paid for my tuition. So definitely make sure that you do apply before that April 2nd deadline because it is very important. Also, you can get it for up to 4 years, and even if you do decide to do the community college route, you could use it for 2 years and then use the remaining 2 years when you transfer out. And then the federal Pell Grant, so this is the maximum amount that you could get for this year, so it's $7,396. It is need-based, so this is based on income, but that's the maximum. So it is a little bit different. It decreases based on if the income is higher and also if the students are taking less units. So this is assuming that a student has an estimated family contribution of 0, so that the estimated family contribution means that families are expected to pay $0, and they're a full-time student. So this is the maximum amount, but it would just fluctuate depending on income and also the amount of units that a student is taking. And again, you just apply through the FAFSA. And then there are student loans. So yes, you can also take a picture of this. At Las Positas, it's a little bit different. You do have to apply for a loan. I know at other like UCs or state schools, you simply just have to click, yes, I want a loan, and they give you a loan. That's supposed to say rate. That is our interest rate for this year and the aid, so this is actually not available anymore, so I will skip over that. But now, how to apply. So there's two different applications. You've heard me mention the FAFSA and California Dream Act application. So the FAFSA is for students that are citizens, eligible non-citizens, and U.S. residents and T visa holders. So essentially, if your student has a social security number, then they would fill out the FAFSA. For example, if students do have a social security number and the household is mixed status and the parents do not have a social security number, that's totally fine. Students could still apply to the FAFSA. Parents would just list their social security number as all zeros, so there's no problem there. And then there's also the California Dream Act application. So this is for students that are undocumented, DACA recipients, TPS recipients, U visa holders, and AB 540 status. So one thing to note is that if your student is undocumented, they could still receive state and institutional aid. They would not be eligible for the federal aid. But one thing to consider is this AB 540 affidavit. So this AB 540 affidavit, if your student graduated from a California school and went to a California school for 3 years, they would be considered for in-state tuition. A lot of students don't fill this AB 540 affidavit out, and then they're being charged. So for example, at Las Positas, $46 per unit if you're a California resident, but if you're not, you're charged $361 per unit. So regardless of what school you go to, make sure that you submit the AB 540 affidavit if your student is undocumented, so that way they are charged in-state tuition if you're going to a California school. And again, this free tuition promise, so it is going to be available for the next year. It's for first-year full-time students, as long as they're California residents. It is a great opportunity. And then, okay, so the main thing, the FAFSA is changing. Typically, it'll be open in October. Next year, it'll be open in October. It's usually open October 1st. Now it's going to be open for December. We still don't have a date. We're waiting on the feds for that to be released. We're hoping it's sooner rather than later, but that's why they pushed that priority deadline to April 2nd. But the main changes is, again, it's going to be available December 2020. That should say 2023, sorry about that. It's going to be reduced from 108 questions to around 36. So if most of you, it's your first time, there will be no new changes because this is all you know. But if you do have older children that have already done the FAFSA, now it's going to be redesigned and it's going to be a lot shorter. Basically, they're trying to align the federal income tax with the actual application. So it's going to have contributors. So now instead, if you are filling out, if you have multiple students in college, you're only going to fill out one portion and then you're going to send it out to each of your children. So that's one of the main changes. And then they are replacing that EFC, or expected family contribution, with another way of calculating, which they're calling the student aid index. So a lot more to come in December, and they did extend again that priority deadline for that Cal Grant to April 2nd. So summary of the financial aid process: mainly apply yearly. Make sure you keep a copy of all the forms. They typically email you a copy. Just make sure you have that. Review your application, and then also make sure that you list all the schools you want to go to. If you don't list one of the schools, then the school won't receive it and you won't receive your financial aid package. So one of the changes too with this new FAFSA is that previously you were able to list up to 10 schools, now you can list up to 20 schools. So by completing the FAFSA or California Dream Act application, you're automatically screened for all of the aid, and then all the schools would email you back with an award package. And then this is our
students is also available at Chabot College. It's a partner school to Las Positas. So not to say don't go to Las Positas, but it's also available at Chabot College. Something else I just wanted to mention is the middle class scholarship. It's part of the California Student Aid. So along with Cal Grant, if your family income is above the ceiling for a Cal Grant, your student could still be eligible for a middle class scholarship. And I see lots of cameras taking pictures, that's totally fine, but this presentation will be on our website. We will email it to anyone who gave us their email either during registration or today. So everything is going to be available, you'll have all the links. And then in addition to Chafee Grant, there's a couple other grants from foster youth, so I just wanted to point that out. CSS Profile. This is another application that you might hear about if you or your student is applying to private colleges. They might say, we need you to fill out the CSS Profile. This is a different application, and it's just to get money from the school for those particular schools that are asking for it. It does ask a lot more detailed questions than the FAFSA or the DREAM Act application. And such as home equity, income, etc. There is a fee for it if you're not already a low-income family. If you are, you qualify for a fee waiver. You don't have to pay anything. But this application is run by College Board, so there's a $25 initial fee, and that includes your first college, and then $16 for each additional school. So you're only going to do this if the school requests it. It is not for UCs, it is not for CSUs, but there are a lot of private schools that ask for it to try to give you money from their school. So just that deadline again, Lizette mentioned it, April 2nd is that hard deadline for state aid for the Cal Grant for the middle class scholarship. We do recommend submitting sooner than that in order to give yourself, the colleges, enough time to give you information to make an informed decision about where to go to college. Because they have to process it, and then it could take a little bit of time before you find out how much you actually qualify for from each of the schools. And May 1st is when the students have to tell the schools where they're going. So we recommend earlier, we recommend still submitting by the March 2nd deadline, which is the normal deadline. And the community colleges do have a later deadline, so if you are only applying for community college, you'll miss out on Cal Grant if you miss the April 2nd deadline, but you'll still be eligible for that first year free. All right, so scholarships. So Lizette mentioned looking at our website, so thank you for checking it out. And we do have lots of scholarships on our webpage. So that's the QR code if you want to scan it, or again, we'll be sending out these slides with the links. Hopefully you've already checked out our scholarship page. But there are so many scholarships out there. So we do have some recommended websites that students can create an account, and they can get scholarships that are geared towards them once they fill out a profile. So scholarships.com, niche.com, and some other ones, they're on our website. And they're for all different reasons. I just want to call out a couple of upcoming deadlines, and there's a lot more on our website, but the Good Tidings Community Service Scholarship, so if you or your student does community service, this is a great one to look at. It is due November 8th, so pretty soon, and it does require a letter of recommendation. And the Cook College Scholarship Program, the Jack Kent Cook Foundation has several scholarships available. So for high achieving seniors with financial need. Also, CVHS, the Castro Valley Education Foundation, they work with sponsors. They have over 50 scholarships that they coordinate. So they work with sponsors in the community who offer scholarships just for Castro Valley students. And multiple awards for a lot of those, so there's over 200 scholarships that get awarded. Scholarship night is January 17th. That's when we'll do a walkthrough of the application. Some of the sponsors will be here to explain what their scholarship is and what they're looking for. And then the application will open that night. It'll be due February 28th. We do recommend using a spreadsheet to keep track of scholarships and deadlines and everything you need to do for them. Students can maybe use their PIQs or personal statements to then also, instead of starting from scratch, they can use what they've written for their college applications to apply for the scholarships. Or if they're applying to community college and CSUs only and not writing anything for their college apps, we recommend writing a few paragraphs that they can turn into these different essays, because the same themes are going to come up over and over when the scholarships are asking for essays. So there was a question submitted with registration about how do you tell if a scholarship is a scam. So if they're asking for money, that means a scam. These are some of the phrases that you might see. There are some scholarships out there where it's basically just more like a sweepstake, where you're just filling out info and you're not doing an essay or you're not telling them more info about yourself. Those aren't a scam, but they're also just more like a lottery drawing, right? So it's not really, you can go ahead and decide, but also you should read the fine print about how they're going to use your information. Usually they're just collecting your information and someone might win, but students do win, but at the same time you're more likely just to get mail. Okay, so after you submit all your financial aid applications, each school is going to give you a financial aid award letter. What is in that? Hopefully they list out that cost of attendance that Lizette was talking about earlier, so that it's right there in the same document with how much money they're giving you. And it should list the different types of money, so the grants and scholarships, that free money that you don't have to pay back, as well as loans, work study, and then it'll also tell you how much you still need to come up with, the gap or the unmet need. So some things to note, when you see the cost of attendance, it doesn't always include all those different fees that Lizette mentioned. So it might only list tuition and fees, so then you need to make sure you're calculating also the housing and the meals and the transportation. For scholarships that are coming directly from the college, you want to ask them, is this renewable every year? Is it going to renew at the same amount? Do I need to keep a certain GPA to maintain that scholarship? Now for private colleges, it's not always set in stone, so if you don't think they're giving you enough money, you can actually contact the financial aid office and let them know, hey, I really want to go to your school, but I don't think I can afford it. Is there any ways? Are there any other grants or scholarships? So really reach out and talk to those financial aid offices. The CSUs and UCs have less flexibility since they're public schools. However, no matter what school you're going to, if circumstances changed since you applied, definitely reach out to the financial aid office. On your FAFSA or your DREAM application, it's going to be using your 2022 tax information. Since then, if anything has changed, you lost a job or whatever else happened, you definitely need to contact the financial aid office at the different schools that you or your child is considering, so that way they can readjust. And the financial aid office can do that on their end. So sometimes the letter will have abbreviations, or again, it doesn't include all the costs. So you just really want to be mindful when you're looking at them. So in this case, it says Fed Perkins L. That L stands for loan. And they're including that and telling you how much financial aid you're receiving, but they're including a loan in that. So even though they're saying you're only going to have to pay $9,950, some of the financial aid is also a loan. This letter is better because it gives you all the cost of attendance, and then it calls out the gift aid, and then it gives you the loan options at the bottom. So you're going to see different letters from different colleges, so you really want to try to find a way to compare them all. So we have a sheet that you can use, and again, these are going to be available. So you want to do something like this when you're comparing the cost from the different schools, where you're laying it all out and you're listing the different costs from the different schools you're considering, and then you're going to list out first all the gift aid. So if your student is receiving a federal Pell Grant, a Cal Grant, other outside scholarships, and then down below you can list loans and work study. I do want to point out about work study. In the FAFSA or DREAM application, it asks, do you want to be considered for work study? Say yes. It's not committing you to it. It just gives you that opportunity. Okay, so there's just some more sample letters. I'm not going to go through all of them. Oh, I actually did want to pull up this one though. This worksheet I just want to show you has a couple examples. The first two examples are actually from Castro Valley High graduates. So these are from actual Castro Valley High students that went on. So this is from a student who's now at San Francisco State. This is from her portal. And so again, it just shows all the grants, and then work study, and then it shows the total, and then these are the costs. And then this is a letter for UC Davis, so they show the costs for on-campus, off-campus, the expected family contribution, which we know from Lizette is not going to be called that anymore, but, and then the scholarships and grants, so it lays it all out. So that's available for you to look at. So yeah, there's some just different sample letters, and again, it'll go over, you know, whether it's on the portal or like an actual letter, but that's what's going to come from the different schools once you, after you apply and after you get into your schools. Okay, so I know I went through this fast, but again, we're sending it out, you'll have access. So, the timeline. So, as Lizette mentioned, this year the FAFSA and the California DREAM Act application opens in December. Once we know the exact date, we will let everyone know. January 17th is that scholarship night to learn about all the Castro Valley Ed Foundation scholarships. And then in February, some private and out-of-state schools will actually have an earlier deadline. So we have that April 2nd deadline that you need to meet for to try to be eligible for Cal Grants middle class scholarships. But some schools will have an earlier deadline, so you may need to get it done early. And then we are having on February 8th Cash for College Night. This is a night where we get volunteers from the East Bay Consortium plus our own staff, and we have tables set up in here and Chromebooks, and you get on. It's for you to come in and finish your application and get all your questions answered and sit down and hopefully finish and submit your FAFSA or DREAM Act that night. And then February 28th is that deadline for the Ed Foundation scholarships. April 2nd is that deadline to submit for Cal Grant eligibility, and I did put a little note about we recommend to submit by March. And then you'll get those financial aid award letters most likely in April. And then the student needs to decide by May 1st which school they're going to. So those letters that we were just looking at, those come maybe late March, early April, and then after the student knows which schools they got into, then they get the financial aid letters. So reminders, the student and all contributors will need their own FSA ID to electronically sign the FAFSA. So students should know their own FSA ID. We encouraged all of them to create it on the PSAT day a couple weeks ago. They're gonna have that for life. So they need to make sure it's their own email, their own phone number, that they know their info. So parents, if you set up an FSA ID for your student, make sure it was an email that they have access to and all that. And then the parent needs their own account. And like Lizette said earlier, if the parent does not have a social, but the student does, they can all still do FAFSA and FSA-ID. And then for the California DREAM Act, both the student and parent will electronically sign as well. And just a reminder to list a California school as your first school for Cal Grant eligibility. You do need to reapply every year. These are all of our websites. So our main counseling page and then the main College and Career Center page. We have a page specifically for the FAFSA and DREAM application. And so on that page, it does have links directly to the different applications. So right here, it has a link right here and right here for FAFSA and DREAM Act application. As well as a lot of resources on here. We do have an Instagram account, so hopefully you follow us on Instagram as well. We do have Trojan Time where we do workshops. We have several colleges still visiting over the next couple of weeks. And 10/26, that's tomorrow. So the University of Nevada, Reno, and then the University of Colorado Springs will be here tomorrow. And college and financial aid help. So we have drop-in help available in the College and Career Center during lunch and after school pretty much every day. Between me, Miss Maddie, Miss Lindsay, and our interns, we have help available. Also, on Saturday, November 18th, from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m., we will be open. And we have virtual help, I mentioned earlier, so we do have drop-in help Monday through Thursday evening, as well as Sunday afternoons. And there will be some help the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of Thanksgiving week on Zoom as well with our interns. All right, so for Q&A, we had some questions that came in with the registration form. So first year of community college, yes, some community colleges are doing the California College Promise Grant a little different than others, but Chabot and Las Positas for sure. But you do need to apply for FAFSA or DREAM application, but your income, it doesn't matter the income. And you will need to enroll full-time as a student. So the income bracket is going to be different for the different types of aid. So for Cal Grant, there's a certain bracket. Then middle class scholarship, we mentioned earlier, it has the income ceiling of $217,000. The Pell Grant has a different bracket, and for Pell Grant, there's different brackets for different amounts. So you can get the max, or you can get different amounts along the way. But then there's also scholarships, and each student is going to be different as well. And then Lizette mentioned earlier that you don't have to create a separate account for each child. The parent account, you can use your same account for different students. It will be the 2022 tax return that you'll be using for the FAFSA and the California DREAM application. So when you're ready to fill it out, you want to just have your social security number ready so you can set up your account. And then I believe it's going to ask you to connect to the IRS to pull your information. So you're going to actually connect to the IRS to pull your tax return info. So you most likely don't need it physically in front of you, but you should have that available in case you do, in case the retrieval doesn't work. And then if you have any other income that's not reported on the tax return. What are some things that we can do now to prepare for college payments? That's a good question. So one, save money as best you can, and apply for scholarships, outside scholarships. How do you go to college for the least amount of money? Well, depends on the student and how much financial aid you get. So first, make sure you're applying to scholarships and financial aid. And then if you don't get enough money to go to the four-year school that you got into, community college is free for a year, and then it's very, very affordable to continue, up with that same bachelor's degree, whether you go to community college first or go straight to four-year. But just keep applying for scholarships. One of our interns, she's, I think in her third year at East Bay, every Saturday morning she spends an hour applying to a scholarship. She just, sets aside a little block of time once a week and applies to a scholarship. So she's paying for school herself, and so she does it by working in scholarships. So what if your financial situation has changed? So I mentioned this earlier, so you do have to use your 2022, and then you need to contact financial aid office to let them know your situation has changed. So we will take more questions now, and then, but we would love your feedback, so if you wouldn't mind scanning that code and giving us your feedback, but we'll also, we have time for more Q&A with Lizette, myself, and my staff. So, questions? So if the household income is $217,000 or less, then you qualify for it. Oh, so if it's more, you could still qualify for other things, but that's the ceiling for the middle class scholarship. So that might come into account for other aid, just not for that particular aid. So you definitely want to contact financial aid. So if your income is higher, but you have a lot of like medical and expenses and whatnot, you want to contact the financial aid office. Yeah, was that shaking her head? Yes. So you just really need to talk to your financial aid office if you have any kind of special circumstances. No, at the college where they're applying.
Is that gross or net income?
Gross income? Gross, adjusted gross income. Other questions? Oh, yeah.
Yes, so the question was, I mentioned that you have to record income and assets, so what assets do you report? Great question. So the assets that are reported are if you have secondary homes, so not ones that you live in. I know a common, so sometimes parents and students have a home that they're renting and they're renting a different home. If they're not living in the home, they would have to report that. So any secondary homes that they don't live in, they would have to report as assets. Any investments, so do not include your retirement, that is not included, but if you do have any other investments, like in stocks that you sold or anything like that. And then also you would not include cars. And they do ask for like how much money is in checking savings accounts for both parents and students. And those are the main ones, and any businesses that you have. Yes. So that's a good question. The savings, yes, the college savings. Typically, no, but I would just make sure for that. Okay, so it looks like they're not including it anymore. Again, there's a lot of changes that are happening with this new FAFSA. So we think not, yeah.
Yeah, they actually did used to include the 529 savings plan, but when we went to the training this semester, like last month, it sounded like that's not included. You don't need to. So the question was about when you list the colleges on the FAFSA or the California Dream application. If your student wants to go to Las Positas or Chabot College or another community college and they know which college they want to go to, they only need to list the one college on there. If the student is not sure, then they should list multiple. So if they for sure community college, but they're not sure which one, just list, any that might be a possibility. And then if they're applying to four-year colleges, you're going to list all the four-year colleges that they're applying to. And like Lizette said, they now allow up to 20, whereas it used to be 10. So we used to have a lot of students who then had to wait till it processed and then go back in and make changes. Hopefully students are not applying to more than 20. If you are, come talk to me. So for the financial aid application, for creating the accounts, so the student has to have an account and the parent has to have an account. Yes, so the student should create an account that they're going to be in charge of, and then the parent creates an account that they're in charge of. Other questions? Yeah. If it's something you want to ask after, we can save some time. Yeah. Do both parents need an account?
Not necessarily, but sometimes if you forget a password, you could always create an account for the other parent. Only one parent has to sign the application. So in short, you don't have to create both. You only need one. If you have all your documents with you, it should take no longer than an hour.
You can apply now. So for community college, you can apply now. It doesn't have the same deadline as UCCSU. It doesn't have like that November 30th deadline, but the application's open for Las Positas and Chabot and DVC.
For the enrollment, then you might have to wait a couple months. Definitely in January is a good time to start applying. So in January, if they say it's not available right now, I would say in January apply for fall.
Yes.
Yes. And it's a great way because if you are planning to attend Las Positas, if you complete the online orientation, the self-assessment that your student does themselves, and they do a student education plan, which just means meeting with your counselor. If you do all three, you get priority registration. So if you start it by January, February, and you do all of that, it's more than enough time. No.
Other questions about financial aid? Yes.
Yes, so for priority registration, it's so you fill out the application in around January. You complete the online orientation, so it's just watching a video, answering a few questions as you go. Doing the self-assessment, so in English and in math, so it's just a student going and answering a few questions. They do it themselves at home. And then also student education. And so that actually requires the student to meet with a counselor and schedule their classes that they're going to take, and that provides them with early registration.
And we help students with everything. So with the community college applications, the financial aid applications, the scholarships. So just make sure your students are coming to see us in the College and Career Center. I'm going to call for any last questions, and then we have a few minutes for individual questions if you want to come up. And then at 7:30, we're going to close the doors. So thank you all so much for coming. We hope you have got some good information. We will be sharing the slides out if you gave us your email either now or on the RSVP form, either way. And it'll also be on our website if we don't have your email. So thank you.